Welcome to the Trigger Warning Talk podcast, where we discuss trigger warning conversations. I'm your host and facilitator and your fire medic CEO, LP, Larry Penton. I want to welcome you. We're going to have a great conversation during this next hour with a very, very, very special guest of mine. Before we get started, I just got to throw out the disclaimers here. Again, this is the Trigger Warning Talk podcast. We discuss real talk, no fluff. Fluff is an action word, Dr. West. It's what you do to pillows and shit. It's what you add to cappuccinos and stuff. We do real talk here. So say what it is. It is what you say. And that's intentional because we know that I call it the Iceberg Syndrome. People like talking about the 10%, but the 90% that's under the water is stuff that is where the crux of the problem is. It's where the hurt, the pain, the trauma, the stigmas, the taboos, the stereotypes, all that stuff is down there in the murkiness and in the dark and in the abyss. We say, hey, here's some scuba gear. Let's deep dive into this stuff. Let's flip that iceberg upside down because we do it. And we have a bunch of information. The Trigger Warning Talk does not do therapy. This is not a therapy session. Dr. West is not going to be your therapist for this next hour. LP is not going to show up if you need help. And seriously, if you need help, if you're triggered by any of this conversation, we have a ton of resources that's going to be listed in the show notes. We are doing this audio and video. This is sponsored by Anchor, being brought to you by Riverside. We are streaming on all major platforms now. If you want to watch this when it comes out, it'll be streamed on Spotify and on the Pending Consultant Solutions LLC YouTube page. If you are triggered, there's some other resources that we're going to have listed on both the audio and the video portion. So we have the sexual abuse hotline and website. We have the domestic violence, the trafficking websites and hotlines listed on there. We have also other information as far as substance abuse and alcohol issues. If you have those issues, we have the Al-Anon, we have Narcotics Anonymous, we have Alcoholics Anonymous. All those numbers are listed. There's a new 911 number that's going to be out nationwide here in the States because this is a worldwide listening audience. But here in the US of A, there's a new 911 number that's listed. It's called 988. That number, again, is 988. It will be listed nationwide and available nationwide July 16th of this year. It is available in some states. They primarily deal with suicidal ideation, but that is the mental health emergency number that you can call that's going to be available nationwide July 16th, 2022. I'm going to introduce this young lady. I'm not going to do her whole CV because it's just too long. I'm just going to give you the Cliff Notes version of it. This is Dr. Annette West. She is a publishing coach. She is an author. She's a speaker. She's a strategist. She has a publishing company called Jatney. I'm pronouncing it right. Jatney Publishing. Thank you. I try not to jack up people's names and titles and stuff. We're going to have a great conversation. And she taught me this great acronym, SWOT, not Special Weapons and Tactics. That's a whole nother conversation. This SWOT is S.W.O.T, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats in relationship to domestic violence, because that's what we're going to be talking about today. Dr. West, welcome to the Trigger Warning Talk podcast. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Dr. West, I want you to tell the audience a little bit about yourself, and then we're going to go into SWOT as it relates to domestic violence. How did you get started into all of this stuff? Why are we talking today?
I mean, listen, it's really just who I am. It's what I've done forever, basically. And, sometimes you do one thing in one corner, another thing in another corner, one thing behind the scenes, one thing in front. And then you say, oh, I got all of these things. What am I going to do with all of these things that I've learned? And one day, just one day, it seems to all fall into place, all just come together the way that it needs to create the wholeness that we need. So it's just about what I've been doing for so many years, connecting with people, just talking about things, trying to keep it just as down to earth as possible, really trying to give people simple life application tools to make it through, not trying to muddy the water and use all of these long terms that people can't even understand. There's a time and a place for that, but we just want to keep it simple. And I believe that the Lord wants us to be well in every area of our life. And that comes when we are able to recognize where we are in each aspect of our lives and how it comes together to give us wholeness. So I often talk about holistic wellness and wellness to wealth, because we are predestined for great things. We are predestined to do more than we're even doing now. But we have to recognize that and be able to speak to ourselves and also receive it when people even give us those accolades. Some people don't like accolades, but listen, we want people to let us know when we on the right track and when we're doing things, because it empowers us even the more. And in the Bible, it says in 3 John 1 and 2, beloved, I pray that all may go well with you and that you may be in good health as it goes well with your soul. So it's not just about having a good soul. It's just about every aspect of our life. Why? Because when we are healthy in an area, then we are well in that area. And when we are well in that area, we can begin to create the predestined wealth that is for us, whether it's mind, mental, body, physical, nutritional, and spiritual. It's all intertwined and relative.
Dr. West, you talked about holistically well, and I know you have a room that's on Clubhouse entitled Holistically Well. It's Monday through Friday, 8:15 Eastern Standard Time, 8:15 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and then on Saturdays at 7 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. What do you talk about in that room?
That's really a social platform, so we don't have an agenda.
Okay.
I am out walking every morning, so I walk 7 days a week. So why not be doubly productive? So that's the way I look at it. I'm going to be out walking anyway, 3 to 5 miles. Why not open up my phone, get on Clubhouse, and invite some other people in? So that's what that room is about, just connecting with people from wherever they are in the world. And we have any kind of conversation that you can imagine falls into that room. And those conversations are based on just a little word or something that somebody comes in and says that triggers a long discussion or multiple discussions in a day.
So you're doing this while you're walking?
That is correct.
All right. Hey, you know what? You're killing 2 birds with 1 stone. You know, you're having some humanity engaging conversations in your heart health. Can't be.
Yes.
Because I'm a first responder, so anything about health is like, oh yeah, come on, let's have that conversation.
That's right.
I want to talk about self-care. I was just in the room before we came on this recording, and it was talking about self-sabotage. For you, the clients that you see, when you talk to them about self-care, what does that mean to you, and what does that typically, excuse me, let me restate that question. What does self-care mean to you as a clinician, as well as someone who is listening to this feedback from these clients? What are they saying to you about self-care?
I think, when I talk to people, one of the first things is people are trying to find themselves. They don't really understand who they are. I mean, they're functioning. they're surviving. And maybe in one area of their life, they may be even thriving. They may, oftentimes I connect with a lot of women, but predominantly maybe ages 40-ish to about 60-ish. And typically the 40 to 50 are women who have reared children. Those children are getting ready to head off to college or they're in college. These women have had, most of them have still had some type of career while raising their children. So it's not the finances have not been the issue. It is not taking care of themselves, not really taking time to think about themselves and self-care, and understanding that buying new shoes and a new outfit is not self-care. But understanding that self-care is really how we look at ourselves beyond those material things. How do we see ourselves? How do we see ourselves for the future? And so I deal with a lot of women who are trying to find their voice for a future. Maybe oftentimes I deal with women who it's always been the children, for instance, everything, and now they're empty nesters and they feel like they're getting ready to crack because those children aren't there. And so just trying to get them to understand that they need to expend some energy on themselves. And that self-care can look like many different things. It could just be sitting yourself down and just breathing easily and not being caught up in everything that's going on around them. So self-care is critical, because if we don't take care of ourselves, and I say this all the time, if we don't take care of ourselves, how are we going to be available for someone else? There's we transition through phases in our life. And at different phases, we need different things. And we have to understand that sometimes changes need to occur in order for us to move to the next level. So just trying to get mostly women that I talk to really look at themselves, to be honest with themselves, to gain the insight and wisdom that they need to help themselves, and be authentic with themselves. Don't try to look at anybody else. Don't try to look at anybody else's model and say, oh, I want to be like this person. I remember, oh my gosh, it's been over maybe about 30 years ago. This lady, we were in prayer, and she said, I was doing some leadership stuff, and she said, she was young. She was a young military person. She said, well, I want to be like you when I grow up. And before I could respond, one of the other ladies has said, and I would have said the same thing. No, you don't want to be like me. You want to be like the best you that you can be. So before I could finish saying it, this other lady said, you don't want to be like her, because if you be like her, then you've got to find out, you're going to say, I'm ready to go through everything she had to go through to get to this point. And so just trying to get people to recognize where you are, think ahead to where you want to be. And now let's talk about what we need to do and put in place for you to get there.
I like that. I said the same thing to all 6 of my children as they were growing up. I said, and I threatened them. I told them, I said, if I ever hear you say you want to be like your dad, we're going to have a problem. Because I don't even want to be like me. I'm a continuous work in progress. That used to be on my IG page. And so for me, I don't want you to go through all the stuff I went through. Now, you're going to make mistakes, and you're going to learn as you grow older. Like, nobody can prevent you from having ups and downs or anything like that. But don't ever say you want to be like somebody. Be the best you. Keep striving. Be the person you want to be, not the person that you are. That's what I would tell them. I want to go and talk about the men. And from a male perspective, I bring that to the forefront because I want to get more men talking about their mental health, because we're not cyborgs. We're not one-cell amoebas. 80% of the conversations that I have on this podcast is the guest. And so I'm going to give you the mic after I give you this question. And it's going to be a 2-part question. Do you see men in your practice?
Definitely. I will talk to a man anytime.
What's the ratio of men to women that you would see on a regular basis, I would say?
Maybe 5% is men.
Okay. Will you explain to us what's your definition of expectations when you talk to men specifically?
Well, first of all, we have to understand that men and women are not the same. So that's the first thing. Understand the way we think is not the same. The way we handle situations and circumstances is not the same. Our makeup is not the same. So we need to understand that. I think we get a lot of freedom once we recognize that. I've been married for 38 years. Geez, can you imagine me and my husband being the same? That would be a terrible situation, okay? That would not be pretty, Larry. But just getting men to be willing to talk, because from the men that I have been connected to, and even that I've seen through the years, they are typically kind of reserved in the back. They think that women talk all the time, but I think women just need to get it out and we don't want to hold on to it. And I think sometimes men don't realize they can talk too. So I think for a male, and this of course is not a this is just a general statement because I don't know all men. Okay. So when I say something, it's just a statement and it applies to whoever it applies to, and whoever it doesn't, it just doesn't.
Okay.
But as I have talked to gentlemen, I find that many times they were fearful of what people would think about them if they knew that they were talking to, anybody for any assistance. But I say this, it doesn't matter whether you are male or female. If you feel like you need to talk to someone, then talk to them.
Okay.
You can find the right person. There, as Larry is going to tell you, there's all kind of hotlines for any type of thing that you need. So if you're looking for somebody and you can't find it, guess what? Reach out to Larry. He'll push you on the right path, because
Yes,
I
ma'am.
would rather you take the time to talk it through with somebody than to sit in the corner and let it fester and build up and you go off on somebody. So we have
Right.
choices and we have to make the right choices in the process. But men, don't think for a minute that your voice is not valued, because it is. And don't think for a minute that you cannot seek help, because you can.
I want to steer the conversation to the title of this podcast. SWOT, not SWAT. You talked about strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, SWOT, and how it relates to domestic violence. For Let's talk from how you deal with men when it comes to domestic violence, because we know men are not just the only perpetrators of domestic violence.
I mean, we know
I think
anybody, male, female, young, old, can be perpetrators.
I'm glad you said that, because there's still this stigma and the stereotype and these taboos that men only can do acts of domestic violence. And so let's talk about that. When you're talking to these men and how they have been traumatized and affected by domestic violence, what types of conversations are you having with these guys? Like, what are they saying to you about it?
Well, one of the things, now remember, I haven't talked to that many men, so my statement is going to be limited, to a small fraction of the population, but just the ones that I have talked to. If it was the male that was inflicting it, it always kind of came back to a control thing, and understanding that nobody has the right to control anybody and everybody has a free will, and that people should be willing to do what they feel is best for them, and that no man should press a woman to do anything, just like a woman shouldn't force a man to do anything. So understanding that, there's one gentleman that I spoke to. He said he just had an anger issue. This is what he said, and I just try to talk like I'm just talking to you when I'm talking to people. Like we having this conversation. We just having a down to earth conversation. I'm not talking none of the stuff that I went to school to learn. I'm not talking about any of that. These just general conversations. And one of the guys said, he just gets angry. He just gets angry, and he has an anger problem. And the And the last person he talked to said he had an anger problem. And I said, it's impossible that you have an anger problem. And he said, I do have an anger problem. I said, you do not. Because if you really had an anger problem, everything that I just said to you, you would be angry at me. What it shows is that you have a mean spirit. Now, there's a difference. I said, and you choose to expend your mean spirit on your wife and your kids. Because when you go to your job and your supervisor tells you something, you don't go off on him. You don't attack him. You don't verbalize all of these words that you say to your wife and your kids to him. You don't grab him or shake him or throw him in a wall. So that tells me it's not that you are angry. You just have a mean spirit towards your spouse. Now, we need to talk about why do you have a mean spirit? Because they got to realize, and typically the guys that I've said this to, they give you the deer in the headlight look. Like,
yes.
Like, I can't believe she called me out on this.
She called me out. I was right. She called me out. I love that you changed the verbiage because that's important. For me, when I'm talking to guys, one of the things that I say to them is, we suppress so many emotions, and that makes us become a walking pressure cooker. And at some point, that pressure release valve is going to malfunction, and it's going to be ugly. And some people explode on a daily basis. For those men that are not the perpetrators of the domestic violence, they're receiving it from their loved one, whether it's their spouse, their partner, whomever. What are those conversations like?
Pretty much, I would say pretty much the same, because I would say the same thing to a female that I would say to a male, from a male to a female, getting them to understand, you choose to be angry. Nobody makes you angry. Anger is a choice. And what I'm saying is, yeah, things happen. People do stuff, but we still choose our reaction to it. And for every action, there is a reaction. That's a rule. So we have to be very mindful of our actions, because with that action, there may come a reaction, and it probably is not going to be the type of reaction that we want. And I like to ask the question, if you don't want anybody to do that to you, then why would you do that to someone else? And typically these people have kids. So I'm like, so you think it's okay to abuse your spouse in front of your kids, and maybe even abuse your spouse? But when your kids get in relationships, you're telling me you would never be upset if somebody abused them. That's what you're saying, because you're saying that it's okay. And they look at you like, huh? Like, what you are doing, you are telling your kids that it's okay to either do it to someone or for it to be done to you. So I think a lot of times just keeping it as simplified as possible in a conversation makes a difference.
I like that. We are listening to Dr. Annette West of Jatney Publishing. We're having a conversation about SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats as it relates to domestic violence here on the Trigger Warning Talk podcast. We are sponsored by Anchor. We are produced by Penton Pending Consulting Solutions, LLC. At any point, if you are triggered during this conversation, please call 911, because I'm not going to show up. Dr. West is not going to show up. But we do have resources available ourselves and in the audio and video description of this podcast.
Powered by Riverside FM.
We're going to continue and jump to our next topic about domestic violence. How do you define domestic violence?
Domestic violence in its simplest form is one member of the family physically impacting another member of the family. That's the initial. But also we know domestic violence can also be in what we say to people, as well as how we put our hands upon people. Okay. And to speak down to people is just as bad. I mean, I don't believe in the statement that they used to say when you were kids. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Words will hurt you, and sticks and stones will hurt you too. So let's not throw sticks and stones at people. Let's not put our hands on people, and let's be mindful of the words that we speak to people. Let's learn some positive things to speak life into people and not death into people. Let's find some positive ways that if we do have anger issues, go outside and kick the ball. Don't kick the kid. Go outside and get your ball and throw some hoops or something. So it's like you don't have to engage, and you don't have to take your anger out or your moment out on someone. You always have to choose, no matter what arises, to turn away, walk away, move forward, and go and do something else. To do what? To relax and to refresh your mind. So I'm always telling people, you need to stop. You need to think and process, and then you need to turn. You have to choose to shift, because if not, you'll allow yourself to stay in that fishbowl with those fish that you know you're not a best fit for, and then you're just at each other.
Let's talk about wellness to wealth. You talked about that when we did our pre-interview. What does that mean? And how does it relate to domestic violence situations?
Well, think about it. If we are not well in our minds, then we cannot begin to utilize our minds effectively to go forward and create the things that we are entitled to that will bring us the wealth. So I'm saying what we think, whether it is good or bad, determines our actions. So if we are thinking negative things, then that means we stay in a dark space. If we can move ourselves to thinking positive things and looking at ourselves in a brighter light, like that self-care that you talk about, then we can begin to say, now let me do the things, let me find the things that are a best fit for me. Let me interject these things into my life so that I can begin to develop myself, so that I can begin to think stronger in other areas, because now I'm not obsessed with the negativity, and I've shifted my thoughts. And so now I can start thinking about the greater that is ahead of me, and I can begin to work towards it. So that's what I'm saying with our minds, because everything, no matter what it is, if it begins in our mind. Everything that we will do begins in our mind. Everything we say begins in our mind. So we have to what? Refocus our minds and have our mind to be that well-watered garden that's ever flowing towards something better, and not staying in a dark place.
You know what I thought about when you talk about wellness to wealth? I thought about how when I have conversations with men, they don't talk about wealth outside of money. Even generational wealth, they don't have those conversations. And so, you always hear the term health is wealth and different things like that. And I talked earlier about how men are walking suppressors because we're taught that as boys. For me, I grew up in a single parent household, and I know that when we talk about domestic violence, I saw acts of domestic violence in my house. I remember one time my mom was dating this guy, and he literally one night snapped, and he was on drugs, and he was someone who just used them recreationally, but he was on drugs. And I remember waking up in the middle of the night to my mom telling me, to come into like the kitchen area, and the cops had been there. And I was like, well, what's going on or what have you? And I was like, I don't know, 12, or I think I was like 11 or 12 at the time. And I found out that I saw my aunt because she was living with us at the time, and she was 4 years older than I am. And she had all these cuts on her forearm, like little bitty slash marks. And I was like, what happened? And she said that he had attacked my aunt, who had intervened as he was attacking my mom. Now I was dead asleep because I didn't hear any of this stuff or what have you. And I just remember, feeling like helpless as a kid because, you're a boy, but you have a man's mentality when it comes to protecting the women in your house. And, I was probably 110 pounds soaking wet, and this guy was probably 220, 230 solid. So, I wouldn't have been able to do anything with him with my bare hands, but I just always remember saying, I can't wait till I get older because I want to find that guy and I'm going to deal with him accordingly. And I'm glad I never met him as an older person because I don't know what I would do. Like, I don't know if I would have gone after this guy physically. I don't know if I would have approached him and had a conversation with him man to man. And so that's something that I've put so far in the back of my mind, but I thought about it when we were getting ready to have this conversation, how domestic violence can ride along that wavelength of your life and your experiences. I'm 51 now. This happened in the early 80s. So, when we talk about strengths and weaknesses and opportunities and threats, can you describe and define that?
Sure. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So this is actually a business principle. And I'm also a business professional. And it really is about looking at and analyzing where we are, what we're doing, what we need to do, how we can do it so that we can get to where we want to go. So, strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities and threats. Strengths and weaknesses are on one side of the spectrum. They are the things that are considered internal to us. Those are the things that we have full control over. We have control over what we're strong at, and we have control over what we're weak at. So we look to see, strength says, I look to see what I am good at, what I am best at, what I can excel at. Those are my strengths. But then we also look to say, what's my weakness? Maybe your weakness could be that you've always let people just walk over you and treat you any kind of way. But now you realize that's a weakness. So what do? You get with a coach. You get with a counselor. You gain some tools that'll help you to stop and block people from stepping into the space where they don't belong. So then what we can do is we can take that weakness and we can adjust that weakness so it's no longer be a weakness, and it become what? It can become a strength in our lives. So we want to work towards dissipating those weaknesses, but unless we look to see and are honest with ourselves as to what that weakness is, we won't be able to find any tools to put in place to rectify that, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So that's the external, that's the internal part, strengths and weaknesses. So now we have what? External. External are the opportunities and the threats. What is outside of your realm that could benefit you? But also what's outside of your realm that could be a threat for you as you go forward. So for instance, a person who has a great personality, that might be a strength. We call them a little social butterfly, right? But yet they are insecure. So they're a social butterfly, but they're insecure. That insecurity is their weakness. And because they haven't understood that that's their weakness, and they don't understand it, they sometimes connect with people who can threaten the life of the butterfly and dissipate the opportunities that should be available for the butterfly. But the butterfly doesn't realize the opportunities because the butterfly is insecure. And that was just a simple example there. But I like to use the example of a butterfly and taking that beautiful butterfly. I mean, I don't know if you remember kids used to, when we were kids, I would see kids do it. They take a jar, they put a top on, and they put holes in it. Then they would go out and look for a butterfly during the day and a fireflies by night. Okay.
Right.
And then they have this beautiful butterfly in this jar, and they just look at the butterfly. And after a while, the butterfly doesn't have enough space to really have any momentum to fly. So the butterfly just starts kind of going down and sits in the corner of the bottle of the jar. And then what happens is the person eventually says, geez, what's wrong with the butterfly? So what do? They open the top of the butterfly, the air comes in, and the butterfly gets the strength to do what? Gain momentum and fly outside of the jar.
That's right.
And that's how we can be in a relationship if we're not careful. We may get in the wrong type of relationships because we don't understand our weaknesses, and therefore we are easily drawn into situations and where we are figuratively, but also physically, maybe put in boxes until, a few different things can happen. You could either die from being in that box. That butterfly could eventually die. Because even if the butterfly can get just a little air through those holes, I don't know what the butterfly likes to chew on or drink off of, but eventually that butterfly is going to need something. And if it's not getting it, what's the butterfly going to do? It's going to die off. And this is what happens in relationships. And so and that's what happens in life, in dealing with people. If we don't know our weaknesses, what I have found out, you may not know your weaknesses, but other people see your weaknesses, and they will easily take advantage of your weaknesses. That's why it's important for us to be able to look at ourselves and see our weaknesses. I'm going to land it right there and see what you got to ask me, Larry.
I want you to continue, Dr. West, because I'm sitting here taking notes, so the mic is yours. Please keep going.
So is it okay for me to tell a little story?
We got the time.
Okay, so I want to tell y'all a story, and it's about shoes. It's about shoes.
That was the other thing I forgot. Now, my mom is going to probably love this part of it because she's a shoe lover. So go right ahead.
She might not like it after a while. She might start out liking it. So here's the story about the shoes. So when I was a little girl, and we lived in, it doesn't matter where we lived. But anyway, there were 6 children. And there was money, but the money wasn't invested in the children, okay? And so there was a point where I had a pair of shoes. And I guess I was about 15 at the time, and I didn't have much. And 2 of the best years in my growing up in school was when I had a sister. I still have that sister. Her name is Tuesday. She was born on my first birthday. That's why her name is Tuesday. So she was my first gift, although she was in the hospital and I was at home and didn't get it till she came home. So she was born on my birthday. We have the same birthday. So the best years for school was when she was still in elementary school and I was in middle school, right? Because we got to wear each other's clothes. So it seemed like I had more clothes and it seemed like she had more clothes. When she got to middle school and I went to high school, that 1 year there, guess what? I had more clothes because we were at different schools. So, but what we didn't have at this particular point, I had 1 pair of shoes and this little, probably the cheapest pair of sneakers that could ever be bought, okay? This is what I had. I was in the choir, and our choir had raised money. We had raised money for our choir to go to New York City. And, parents had to give kids money. And my mom gave me a whole short of $25, okay? A 20 and some ones to go all the way to New York for 5 days. The good thing was they covered your breakfast and your dinner on the trip. But while you were out during the day, if you wanted anything to eat, you had to get it. So we know if we think about the 70s, $1 was decent at the time. Well, because I didn't have but that one pair of shoes, right? And what I took with me on the trip. So as I'm out and about, I see all these other kids spending lots of money, and they're talking about, oh, I got $200 for the trip and I got $300. So, I don't have but 20 some dollars, less than 25. So, I'm not going to say anything about what I have or don't have. I'm just out in the midst with everybody. But I see this place that has shoes, and the shoes draw me in because I don't have shoes, right? I don't have shoes. So the shoes draw me in. I see this beautiful pair of sandals, tan color, open toe, nice little straps going across the top of the shoe. And I look at these shoes, and the shoes are $20. And y'all only got like less than $25. And my question was, which is more important? To keep the $20 with the few dollars, or to get a pair of shoes? So which one do you think I did, Larry?
I think you got the shoes.
I bought the shoes, Larry. I bought the shoes. Now, that's an okay story, right? But guess what the problem was with that story?
What's that?
Them shoes became a weakness for me. Because every time I had money, I wanted to buy shoes. Why did I want to buy shoes? Because I had this stigmatism from when I was a child, and I didn't have shoes. So I always wanted shoes. Well, then in your environment, beyond shoes, what do? Psychological, we see things. You don't just need shoes. You need outfits to go with shoes. Women need pocketbooks to go with shoes. So before you know it, you buying these outfits, you buying these outfits, you buying these outfits. So as I developed and I grew and I was married, guess what? The money was coming in good. I could buy anything that I want, and I was buying shoes, y'all, and everything that went along with the shoes. Why? I picked up a bad habit. It had become a weakness. Now my strength was that I knew how to make money. I knew how to earn money. My weakness was I wasn't as wise with saving money. You see what I'm saying? So we take that situation, and one day I'm sitting in the church, and it's coming up on Valentine's, the month of February. And the pastor, I don't know if he got some spiritual revelation or what, but he said something about shoes. And he goes, well, I just want to ask a question. He said, just raise your hand. He said, and keep your hand raised if each question applies to you. So he said, how many in here have 10 pair of shoes? So I raised my hand with everybody else, right? I raised my hand. And my hand is up. Then he says, well, how about 10 pair of shoes? Keep my hand up. He gets to 100 pair of shoes. It's only a couple of us with our hands up, right? Okay. So then he says, how many in here have more than 100 pair of shoes? My hand is still in the air. My hand is still in the air. So when we finish the service, you know what people start saying? You always look nice, but I can't believe you have 100 pair of shoes. I can't believe you have more than 100 pair of shoes. And we get into these dialogue about these shoes. But this is what happened was conviction hit me is what happened. When the lady said, well, I got 10 pair and I thought I had too many pair of shoes. Then my mind went to SWOT analysis. My mind jumped back to the SWOT analysis. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So this is how I equated it to that from a personal perspective. I equated it that I had a lot of great characteristics about me, a lot of wonderful things. I'm a people person. I love to talk. I know how to earn money. I have the gift of administration. I know how to do business, startup, and all that. I know this. But my main weakness was, and this is what I've learned to say to people, just because you can doesn't mean you should. So my question to myself became, just because you can buy all of that doesn't mean you need to spend your money on all of that. And then I had to look at, the Lord showed me where I had missed opportunities because I wasn't looking clearly towards the future. So I missed opportunities because I did not think wisely about the resources that were being built from my strengths. And I allowed my weakness begin to rule my life. And the threat to me was that I had to learn how to stay out of the stores, y'all. I had to talk to myself and say, that's not where you're going to go. So how does this relate to us in bad relationships, right? In domestic relationships or whatever? We know what we good at. Listen, when y'all good at something, them fellas or them girls going to be trying to get with you because they see what you good at. But they may have ulterior motives. You know, many a person wants you to be the one on their arm until they get you. And then that personality, it's not the other it's not a new personality that showed up. The personality was there. They were just waiting for the opportune time to show up, to bring it out. And we help them a lot to be the way they are, because we talk about prior relationships and what went wrong. And then they always say, well, I would never do that to you, and I would never treat you that way, and I would never, but they have every intention of doing it, but they got to draw you in first. So sometimes our strength may be that, well, a weakness may be that we talk about ourselves too much, and we talk about the person that we're not with any longer. I used to say, if you're not with them, why are you talking about them? If the value there has dissipated, why are you talking about it? If they treated you like crap, but you're not with them, why are you talking about it? Because you will find yourself in the same type of relationships every time, dealing with the weaknesses that you have not learned your potential and your strength. And so therefore, the threat, that person will begin to creep into your life so that they can take advantage of your sweet personality, your kind and caring heart, your willingness to listen to everybody's story and believe everything they say. They will take advantage of that. But we have to say to ourselves, I know what I'm good at. And you know what? I know I'm not good at this. I used to tell people and I still tell people this. If you're thinking about dating somebody, like somebody of the opposite sex, so if you're a male, you want to date a woman, you're a female, you want to date a male, bring them by. They should tell my clients, bring them by, let me talk to them. I'll be able to tell you before they leave. And I'll be able to tell both of you if y'all need to just cease and desist, as they say.
How many would take you up on that?
You know, I've had a few. And let me tell you something, Larry. The ones that said they would and they didn't, they already been broken from that relationship. And some of them married them anyhow, and they're already divorced from them.
Wow.
I think it's wise counsel not to just think that this person makes me feel so good. I'm in love with this person, and this is the person for me. And the word love, I think, is utilized wrong. And I think a lot of times when people say I love you, when Christians say I love you, they typically are talking about, because I have a relationship with Jesus and Jesus loves me and I love Jesus, then I love you because I love Jesus. But that doesn't mean this is the person for you just because you love them like you love Jesus. There's different types of love, and understanding that the different types of love will be the determining factors as to whether we are able to flow in these relationships and if these relationships will be best for us. So I like to say, don't let love rule unless it's the love of God. What am I saying? When my husband and I were dating, we actually talked about this. We actually talked about this love. I love you. I love you because Jesus loved us first. I love you, but I'm not in love with you. In love is something that develops. Attraction and infatuation is what we get to first. because we don't know anything about the person when we first see them, but our eyes are drawn to them. Their conversation, we may be drawn to the conversation. But that doesn't mean that that's the best person for us to spend our life with. And I might look at you the first time I meet you, and I might say to myself, this is going to be the guy for me. But people say it all the time. And they say, oh, it was love at first sight. It wasn't love at first sight. It was just an attraction. And you just said, I like what I see, and I think I want this person. But it wasn't love at first sight. And people don't recognize that. And I think when people do recognize that, they will keep themselves out of a lot of relationships that they don't belong in. Just a little sideliner there.
Dr. West, you just keep dropping all these nuggets of knowledge for us. I want to talk about plans of action. How do you develop plans of action for those men and women who are experiencing domestic violence?
Ooh. So one particular this was a really tough one, because it was someone that I knew personally, and I was very close to this person, and we actually lived in the same neighborhood. We lived in the same neighborhood, not far from each other. So, like I said, I like to keep it as down to earth as possible, right? So I think we have to look at situations for what they are. So she comes, this is a true story. She comes to my door and she's distraught. She has a brand new baby, maybe about 5 months, 6 months, on her hip. She comes to my door. She's got a bruise on her face. She's got scratches on her neck. And she comes into my house. And she sits down and she's crying. And I'm a straight shooter, y'all. I'm really a straight shooter. Everybody can't use the medicine over here that I dish out. But I think you got to be tough with some people. And I said to her, what do you want? I mean, you came to my door, but what do you want me to do for you? And that would be my question to anybody to come and sit in the chair. What do you want me to do for you? How do you want me to help you? Because I could give you all the information in the world, but if you just coming because somebody sent you, but you're not having any intention of changing anything, then it's just a waste of my energy and it's a waste of your energy. So we talked for a little bit, and I said to her, well, you got a couple of options. Because what I'm not going to have is your man coming to our door looking for you. That we're not going to have. So these are your options. The phone is right there. You can call 911 right now and have the police come here right now and deal with this, because this is domestic violence, period.
Absolutely.
Period. I said, or you have the option to walk out my door with your baby on your lap, on your hip, and you can go back to your home. Those are really the only two options you have, because you can't stay in my house. She took the option of calling the police. While she had called the police, guess who comes to my door?
The spouse.
He shows up at my door. And here's the thing, one of the nicest guys in the world, but he drank. And when he drank, that other personality showed up. He was the worst when he drank. Beautiful personality when he didn't. So he came to my door. I had locked the screen door. And we had those doors where you had the top was window pane and the bottom was closed in. So I looked out, and you open the curtain, you look out and you see him. So I opened the door. He's standing at on the outside of the screen door. I said, what do you want? I'm looking for so-and-so. Is she here? She is. What do you want? I want her. No, you can't have her. What do you want? I want her. No, you cannot have her. I said, so what you need to do, you need to walk away from my door, because you're not coming in my door. And if you try to come in my door, the consequences of you stepping across my threshold will not be pretty for you. So he backed up from the door. Just as he backed up, guess what happened? The cops came.
Okay.
The cops came. Cops came in, left him outside with one cop. One cop came in. I had talked to my friend before the cops got there, and I said, you will press charges. Because if you don't press charges, nothing's going to change. I said, if you don't press charges, your daughter, who's 6 months old, may be the next one he's beating on. And you may be dead. I said, you will press charges. I said, because what's going to happen is you're not coming to my door again with this issue. So she did. She pressed charges. I went down with her. She went through the whole process. They made him, leave. He had to go through some kind of counseling. The court set up for him. He had to go to some kind of counseling and all kind of stuff for a year. So he had no contact with her for a year. He didn't see his daughter for a year. Let me tell you, when that year was over, they got back together. They got married. They stayed together until he died about 3 years ago, raised their daughter up in the way that she should have been grown up. But if my friend had not called the police and stood up for herself, she probably would have been in that forever or been dead from it.
That's a great lesson, and I'm so thankful to you for being a friend and being a professional and standing up for what's right and giving her the expectations of accountability, as well as the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities, and the threats that she was dealing with, that she needed to deal with here and now. Like, we're not talking abstract. We're not talking hypothetically speaking. You're actively involved in this domestic violence situation right here, right now. The scars, the bruises. You got your daughter on your hip who may or may not have seen it, but can feel that negative energy. It's not a matter of if, but when and where an active violent incident can happen. These things happen in the home just like they happen out in society at large. And I put these incidents that happen in society under the umbrella of domestic violence because it's happening in our home where we live here in the USA. Same principle applies. I'm so thankful that you held her feet to the fire and that through law enforcement and through mental health, that family was able to thrive and heal and move past whatever that conflict was. Dr. West, we got a few more minutes. I just want to thank you so much for sharing your insights, your professional expertise, teaching us about SWOT, not SWAT, because there's a difference. And we always laugh about that because when you first said it to me, I was like, okay, here comes my first responder mindset. Like, okay, she's going to be talking about some law enforcement stuff or whatever. You was like, no, I'm not. I'm saying it makes me laugh.
That's not my area.
It makes me laugh every time I think about it because the look on your face and the look on my face was like, okay, wait a minute, we're not meeting the minds here. So, I wanted to talk real quick about your publishing company, Jatney Publishing. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. Jatney Publishing is a Christian faith-based company. I work with faith-based people, and all of our products, all of our books and resources are going to be positive and uplifting. Even if it's something that maybe we're talking about today in a book, that's something that can be empowering to someone. And it's real life that's going forward. And I've been doing publishing. I've been I don't want to say a jack of all trades, but an Annette of many things. So I published my first book back in 2006. And from 2006 to 2016, I was actually just doing self-publishing coaching. So I was coaching other people who wanted to become self-publishers. And then in 2016, I officially opened up the publishing company, started doing more books, started inviting people in to have their books done, started doing devotionals and podcasts to get a lot of people's voices out there. I really have a heart for devotions and anthologies because it allows me to put many voices in one resource. And instead of people paying say $3,000 to $5,000 to write a book. They pay a fraction of that cost to invest to have their story in a book, but yet they're still an author and they have that book that they can brand and market for themselves. So my goal is to get more people to get their stories told, more people to be a part of projects and collaborations. And that is my goal. As you mentioned before, I'm on Clubhouse right now. I'm on there 5 days a week. I do a room at 11 o'clock a.m. Monday through Friday, and then again on Wednesday and Friday at 5 p.m. And that room is always about writing, publishing, branding, marketing, and launching your resources and your books.
Dr. West, I'm going to have your social media links from Clubhouse to Instagram, your website information. All your contact information will be listed in the audio and the video portion of the show notes. We are so thankful, so thankful to have you here. You know, I am so excited. I am so excited.
Thank you. I have thoroughly enjoyed it. I have thoroughly enjoyed it.
I want to ask you one final question, and most of our guests I give an end question to. Here's your question. If you could write a letter or an email to a younger Annette West, what would you say?
To a younger Annette West, I think
Yes.
my letter to myself would be, know who you are.
Know who you are.
Know who you are. Be the best you that you can be. I think my environment many times early on didn't allow me to be my best, but that didn't mean I couldn't develop into the best once I left that environment. So it would have been nice to be in a different environment, but guess what? We moved from that. The way I talk now is not the way I talked as a child. They tell me I was one of the quietest kids around. My environment didn't allow me to speak. Okay. So I was quiet. But once I learned that I had a voice, you can't shut my voice.
Dr. West, I want to thank you again for joining us. That's going to conclude our portion of this podcast. This will be, the show date will be July 21st of this year. So be looking for that. Dr. West, I'm going to be joining you in these Clubhouse streets. You inspired me to do some more walking in my neighborhood, and so I'm going to be joining you on some of these morning holistically well conversations that you have, because I'm typically either the only guy or a handful of guys that even come to these spaces. So I love it. It doesn't bother me at all. And I take every question, good, bad, ugly, any comment, any commentary. I'm always ready, and so I want to thank you personally for being a superhero, because all superheroes don't wear capes. And you're doing some life-saving work here. So I appreciate you. Thank you, guys. So much love for you. See you in these Clubhouse streets, Dr. West.
Thank you, dear. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. That's Dr. Annette West. And we're going to have her back at a later time, to talk about some more of these issues, specifically about domestic violence. We always see in every show talking about a missing person case. Those that know, I'm from St. Louis, Missouri. And so for me, this case means a lot to me, because this young boy, Christian Ferguson, has been missing for 15 years. I'm going to play a news article or a news video from the local NBC affiliate in St. Louis, Missouri, KSDK.com. And this is from KSDK.com. It's talking about, after 15 years, still no answers in Christian Ferguson's disappearance. Now, this was published on May 5th, 2018, and it was updated May 8th, 2018. So it's been more than 15 years. I want to play this article and I want you to listen to the story. And hold on, let me get it queued up here. Actually, let me reset this because it's playing all these ads. But Christian Ferguson, again, is from my hometown of St. Louis, Missouri. So I want to play the story and I want you to listen because we don't give enough media coverage to our Black and brown men, women, and children. And the Trigger Warning Talk podcast is all about changing that. We want to give the same energy and the same attention to those individuals that do not typically get that coverage.
It's been 15 years since a little boy from St. Louis County vanished. Where is Christian Ferguson?
There were no answers in 2003, and there are still no answers today. In tonight's True Crime Tuesday cover story, we hear from a mom who is still grieving and a person who has never shared their story until now. Here's our Ryan Dean.
It's just adorable.
Theda Wilson often finds herself upstairs in her home watching old home movies of her son Christian.
I can hear his voice.
Old home movies that bring her a lot of joy and a lot of pain.
In my mind, this is the age, around the age that he is.
These clips and photos, all she has left. It's almost been 15 years.
Yes.
When you think about 15 years, what goes through your mind?
What goes through my mind is, why is it taking so long?
Christian has been missing since June of 2003.
It's just something that you shouldn't have to learn to live with.
Police say the 9-year-old disabled boy was abducted in a reported carjacking.
It was on the morning of June 11th when Christian's father, Dewan, who had legal custody of the boy at the time, called 911. Police say he told them he was using this payphone at the intersection of Page and Skinker, right near the city-county line, when someone stole his SUV, and he said Christian was sleeping in the back seat.
The SUV turned up 2 hours later on Ronbar Lane in Ferguson, but no signs of Christian.
Christian had short-cropped hair and was wearing a diaper wrapped in a multicolored blanket.
Police and volunteers searched frantically, trying to find the boy. They knew he suffered from a rare metabolic disorder that left him severely disabled. Every second counted.
I pray that my son is alive.
Theda says right from the beginning, she suspected her ex-husband knew more about her son's disappearance.
Sometimes I have to catch myself when I speak about it because I'll say he came up missing, but he didn't come up missing. And that's what really angers me the most.
Christian's sister shares her mother's anger.
Because I want to find out the truth. I want to find where Christian is, where his body is. I want to be able to bury him, not just have to have a memorial.
Lynn Ferguson remembers the day before her older brother went missing. She was 8 years old and shared a bedroom with Christian. She says that day her brother was in a lot of pain. She also noticed Christian's feeding tube was missing and tried to find it.
I looked for a long time, and I believe I tried to feed him something, obviously to no avail, and he was still moaning in pain the entire night.
Lynn claims that same night she watched her father and her stepmother take Christian into the other room.
When they brought him back in the room, I do know that he was just about lifeless.
Five on your side wanted to hear Dewan's side of the story, but he didn't want to talk with us.
I'd like to talk to you a second about Christian Ferguson.
It is a missing persons case at this point.
We also asked for a police report and only received a 2-page document with most of the details blacked out.
We're very limited to what we can tell family. And I know that that's part of the frustration. Where is justice?
Police won't say whether they have a suspect in Christian's disappearance because it's still an open case. They hope this story generates new leads.
No information is too small. Our hearts do go out to the family involved with this. And I'm not a mother, but I can only imagine. It feels like a nightmare.
A nightmare that lasted 15 long years.
I want all the answers. And I want to see justice. I don't want to die and then my grandkids say, oh, Christian was in my family, and Mom died before she got closure.
Ryan Dean, 5 on your side.
And we talked to 3 former investigators who worked the case. All 3 declined to go on camera because they didn't want to jeopardize the case. Prosecutors say they met with police years ago. They say there was insufficient evidence to charge anyone. The attorney who represented Lynn Ferguson at the time said his client was